It's talked about in the boardrooms of the most successful companies, how bottom-line business results are linked to employee engagement driven by inspiring leadership. So let's talk leadership. I'm Bill Hogg, and in this series I talk in depth with senior leaders about high-performing leadership competencies and the tools and techniques they are using to drive business growth in today's economy. With me today is John O'Donnell, President and Chief Executive Officer of Allstate Insurance Company of Canada. But before we begin our discussion, let's find out a little bit about Allstate Insurance. The Allstate Insurance Company of Canada, headquartered in Markham, is a member of one of the largest organizations in the world, the Allstate Corporation. Allstate Canada has provided property and casualty insurance products to Canadians since 1953. Allstate provides a full line of auto, home, individual, life, and financial products through a network of 450 agents in over 250 communities and 1,000 employees. As much as they touch the lives of Canadians through product and service, they are justifiably proud of their personal and community involvement through a wide range of not-for-profit and charitable organizations such as Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Crime Stoppers, United Way, Traffic Injury Research Foundation, and Junior Achievement. The slogan, "You're in good hands," exemplifies the commitment, knowledge, and professionalism of Allstate's trusted advisors to customers, making Allstate one of Canada's strongest personal line insurers. You can find out more about Allstate Insurance at www.allstate.ca. Now, my guest today, John O'Donnell, is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Allstate Insurance Company of Canada and Vice President of the Allstate Insurance Company of the United States. John was appointed President and CEO on July 18, 2011, after having served as Field Vice President, Southeast Region in the US of A. He joined Allstate in 2009. John has also held leadership roles with GMAC Insurance, Walt Disney Corporation, and Goldman Sachs. John earned his Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics from the United States Naval Academy and served as a helicopter pilot in the United States Marine Corps, achieving the rank of captain prior to leaving the service. He also holds a Master in Business Administration, Finance, and Economics from the University of Chicago. John, welcome to Let's Talk Leadership. That's quite an eclectic background that you bring to us. So I'll be interested in hearing some of your thoughts on how leadership possibly in Canada, from your experience in the limited time you've been here, might even be different from what you experienced in the US. But let's start with just your personal perspective on what do you consider to be some of the key leadership competencies when you look around your own leadership team that you look for as being particularly important?
Sure. I would say first there are some non-negotiables that we look for. Such as leading with integrity, being a team player, I think are critical. And if you don't have that, then it's hard to build off of anything else. When we look at leadership competencies, I'm personally looking at people leadership as well as thought leadership. So for people leadership, we're looking for people who are good coaches, develop talent within the organization. As I mentioned, team players, they collaborate well, and they lead with courage. That's often something that is challenging to do and can separate leaders who are trying to get to the next level. When I think of thought leadership, we are looking for people not only with a strong base of knowledge, but understanding how to apply that knowledge, as I mentioned, in a collaborative way, and being able to look around the corner, around the bend, what's coming, and how do I make decisions without having perfect information in a world that's constantly changing.
Well, the term I love is the non-negotiable, and I find that not enough organizations really take that, what I consider a fairly hard stand on that kind of stuff. I mean, being non-negotiable. And you've identified some of the key characteristics, but to create that non-negotiable headspace within an organization, you have to have real clarity around your values. And that leads into courage. So share with me a little bit about when you think of your organization, what are the values that really set your organization apart?
When I first came into the role here in Canada, I talked about the leadership culture that we needed to create in the organization. This is really a combination of some of the things that I saw worked for me and my personal style and how I like to lead teams and organizations. So I talked about we need to be collaborative, we need to be transparent, and we need to empower people throughout the organization. So we really built those three pillars or tenets of leadership: collaboration, transparency, and empowerment.
Well, you made another interesting comment there, and that was, when you came into this environment, and you certainly didn't dismiss or diminish what the leadership environment was previous, but you needed to be in an environment that reflected your leadership style.
Yes.
And I think that strong leaders, good leaders, recognize that leadership starts at the top. Leadership and the kind of values of an organization is not a collaborative exercise per se. It has to start from the top. Mm-hmm. So how did you, being the new guy on the block, walking into what may be a U.S. organization, but you are on Canadian soil, and you're the American guy coming up here.
That's right.
I'm sure there were some issues associated with that. How did you go about having and starting that conversation about, what are the values of this organization going to be about?
Well, I started by listening a lot and listening to employees. I made it a priority to spend, and even still to this day in the first year, so I'm just over a year in tenure, spent a lot of time with the leadership team, and we started with some of the basics even. We talked about some of the dysfunctions of a team and tried to open up with each other about, and we graded ourselves. We took a little survey about how strong are we with trusting each other and being open and vulnerable with each other. Had some exercise. It was uncomfortable in some of those meetings, and I made it a point to, and I still do, meet offsite with the leadership team once a month, and we have some good conversation. We can work on team building and sort of taking the temperature on the culture in the organization.
Well, one of the things, trust is, in my opinion, and in the research that I've read, is probably the number one issue at most boardroom tables. And it's not that, I'm going to steal out of your wallet. It's that, can I trust that you will do what you commit your team to do, and you will do it in a timely basis and be done in the quality of, that's expected. When you think about it, trust, that would seem pretty fundamental, but the reality is most businesses don't have it. So how did you go about, building that trust? And I know you didn't sort of stand there and fall backwards and say, "Oh, catch me." Like, what are some of the kind of things that you might have done, or so that some of our viewers, could, try to do that kind of exercise themselves?
Well, they do sometimes catch me, which I appreciate.
Figuratively, not literally, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think I agree with you that that's foundational. That's where you need to start. I think it's open, or I think it's important to be able to have an open conversation in the boardroom. Once again, I did mention vulnerability.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, we're uncomfortable sharing in a way that leaves us open at that level, and I think it's important to get beyond that and be able to draw upon the experience and the expertise of others in the room. I've certainly had to do that personally.
Yeah.
Given you've seen my background, I'm working with people who have been in the insurance industry for 35 years. They certainly
what do you know,
see
right?
some things that I don't see. So that's been one of the keys for me, is surrounding myself with good people. But not only that, having that collaborative conversation. I encourage, when you getting back to your question of trust, I encourage an environment of challenge and debate in the boardroom, to the point where if something's said and someone's being silent on a matter, and I think they may have an opinion, I'll try and dig it out of them, because my goal is have that challenge and debate, and then everyone's heard, and then once we get aligned, we're aligned and we're lockstep when we leave the boardroom.
Yeah. And it's amazing what you can tell from the body language of people when everybody's sitting there, and I don't know how many meetings I've sat in when you're trying to go through that session where you see those one or two people, and it's often those one or two people that will actually voice a comment or concern that the other people also have. but no one has the courage to really say it. And I think that one of the things that you talk about when you're building trust is you got to keep it focused on the issues and away from the personalities. So if I have a concern about something that you are doing, it's about here's the action you've done or haven't done, or here's the problem we're seeing with this department, as opposed to you're a bad leader because your team isn't doing something.
Absolutely, and that gets into holding each other accountable and understanding that it's okay to do so, and that by doing so we're making each other better, rather than knocking someone down. And once you can really get to that type of environment among the team, you really can have that openness. And people have to understand it's their responsibility to hold each other accountable. And in fact, those are some of the conversations I've had with people when we're having checkpoints on performance. Is I would ask you to hold the others more accountable, and to be able to do that, I do ask everyone to think at the enterprise level. So
Right.
think outside of your functional responsibilities. But think as an owner of the overall business.
Well, and that starts to get us into the area of setting goals, et cetera, for the enterprise. And I want to come back to that in a few minutes, probably
Sure.
after the break. But one of the comparatives that I often use when I'm talking to clients is, if you're on a sports team and if you're the right winger on, say, a hockey team and you're not coming back, the defensemen let you know it, and they let you know it pretty quickly. But I find in business when, some of our teammates aren't doing their job, that whole sense of accountability is not being fulfilled, we seem to be less inclined to let them know. Any insights on why that might be? And I particularly, think that your involvement with the military, where if someone lets you down, it can often be a life and death situation. It's a little different than, well, you didn't get the policy signed. What's the learning from sports or military that you might apply to a business perspective?
I think it's once again taking that collaboration to the next step and understanding that you in any type of organization, whether it's a sports team or the military or business environment, it's challenging to achieve your goals if you function in silos. And sometimes that's the pattern we fall into in some of these organizations. I learned that early on in the military. The integration is key, both from a planning perspective and then throughout the entire mission plan. I recall there was I had just been designated a section leader. I was an attack helicopter pilot. And we were planning our part of the mission, and this was a big joint operation where you had we were supporting infantry, and you had fixed wing aviation and artillery. And I went to and a lot of the training we had done had been sort of by the textbook. So we went. I took my section. We started planning, and a more senior pilot came over and looked at what we were doing. He says, "So what's going on here?" Well, I'm putting our attack position here because it's covered by this terrain, and it'll help us get to the time on target when we need. And he said, "Well, how are you possibly even thinking about this without working with the infantry and the artillery?" And I always remember that moment. You can't plan in a bubble. You can't operate in a bubble. You have to operate as one joint unit. So once again, that extends from beyond planning to if there's a certain time on target and someone needs to be there at a given time and you're out there, you own it as well.
Yeah.
Same thing in business. If you're on the sales team and you need certain marketing in place at a given time, you're responsible. Same thing with marketing. It's not just about creating, say, the creative material and passing it along. You're responsible for the performance of that all the way through
Absolutely.
to the desired result.
Well, after the break, I want to come back and talk a little bit more about that, specifically in the area of how you start to set goals and use those in order to create some joint accountability.
Great.
All right.